Here we go. We're rolling.
Says we're rolling. All right,
We're
perfect.
rolling.
Thank you, Trustee. I appreciate you.
Yep.
All right, family. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Let me just share my screen. Give me just a 2-second moment. And then if you can affirm that you can see my screen, I would appreciate it. Can you see the screen okay?
Yep.
Green
Yeah.
section? Okay, excellent. All right, welcome, 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 everyone. The world. To
Yay.
our Tuesday night Bible study. So grateful to have you here to join us. I am Minister Cole Terrence Randolph Williams. I will be leading us in tonight's Bible study lesson. So just want to let you know real quick that you can find us here where you are on the
You
YouTube
got it.
channel. Tuesday nights at 7:30. We actually join here in the Zoom platform and we go live roughly around now. But we join in Zoom, so it's a very intimate setting where you can come in, share any prayer requests you might have, and definitely share any testimonials, as we also want to just lift you up and celebrate all wins, right? So you can find us also on Sundays here on the platform of YouTube, Facebook. You can see our handles right there. And if you happen to be in the Maryland area on a Sunday, you can find us at the Allegheny Avenue 120 in Towson, Maryland. So you're welcome. Come on out. The price is always right. Just love. Okay, so here we are going to be unpacking or just looking at rather for discussion the book of Luke, looking at the chapter of the sixth chapter, sorry, verses 17 through 26. And overall, for our community, for our ministry, our theme for this year is compassion. Well, that's our theme for our movement that we're a part of. But here at this ministry, dialing it in, we took that word compassion and we activated it by saying compassion is love in action. That's what we wholeheartedly believe. And we've taken an oath to demonstrate that throughout this year. And so my title for the class on tonight, as we look at this text, is that's required compassion in action. Required compassion in action. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so we have here this text. The version of the text is going to be coming from what is called the Inclusive Bible, the First Egalitarian Translation. So I will read the first. I have actually 3 slides total, excuse me. So I'm going to ask someone to take the second slide, and then someone can jump in and do the third, and that will close us out. Just to, mix it up a little bit, get some participation, get the blood flowing. All right, so we're starting with verse 17 through 19. So coming down the mountain with them, Jesus stopped in a level area where there were a great number of disciples. So this was known, just real quick, I've seen the title is called the Sermon on the Plain, which also means sermon on the plain, on the surface level, right? All right, so a large crowd of people was with them from Jerusalem and all over Judea to as far north as the coastal region of Tyre and Sidon. People who had come to hear Jesus and be healed of their diseases and even to be freed from unclean spirits. Indeed, the whole crowd was trying to touch Jesus because power was coming out of him and healing them all. Here we have our next slide. Somebody can read this for me.
Looking at the disciples, Jesus said, "You who are poor are blessed, for the reign of God is yours. You who hunger now are blessed, for you'll be filled. You who weep now are blessed, for you'll laugh. You are blessed when people hate you, when they scorn and insult you, and spurn your name as evil because of the chosen one."
Very
Amen.
good. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Excuse me. And our final slide, verses 23 to 26. Who can take that for me?
On the day they do so, rejoice and be glad. Your reward will be great in heaven, for their ancestors treated the prophets the same way. But woe to you, rich, for you are now receiving your comfort in full. Woe to you who are full, for you'll go hungry. Woe to you who laugh now, for you will weep in your grief. Woe to you when all speak well of you, for their ancestors treated the false prophets in the same way.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sister Susan. Appreciate you. All right, family. So I just want to unpack this and talk about to frame it around, the context, who were the players, who was present, if you will. Just give us a little bit of a backstory as far as information to help us get informed, and then definitely we'll just overall, discuss it. And so my goal is always to just have open dialogue, open conversation around how the text sits with us, and then certainly the goal from that point would be how we can use what we're framing around our understanding of the text and apply it in today's time. All right, so let's look at the authorship of this gospel, the Gospel of Luke. Some things that I've discovered from my study is that traditionally the gospel is attributed to Luke, although the gospel itself does not name the author. Based on the book's style and knowledge of medicinal matters suggests it was written by a highly educated person. Now, Luke was a disciple of Jesus and a physician in the first century Common Era. The Common Era means it's based on the most frequently used calendar system, which is the Gregorian calendar. The period in reference was between AD 1 and AD 100. Scholars have identified a timeline between 26 AD and 36 AD that this text will be applied to. AD means Anno Domini. It's a Latin word, a Latin term for the year of the Lord. Now, the earliest manuscripts support the title according to Luke. However, some scholars have expressed doubt that Luke was the author of the gospel. So just holding that. Some scholars believe that Luke was what is considered a Gentile Christian. The term Gentile refers to people who are not Jewish. And others believe that Luke was what they called an Hellenized Jew. So this refers to a Jewish person who spoke Greek and adopted some aspects of the Jewish culture. And most scholars concluded that based on the elements of the Gospel of Luke, that the author was a Gentile speaking to a predominantly Gentile community. Okay. All right. Now, who's who? Let's talk about it in terms of the characters and the audience, right? Who's there? So Jesus is speaking to a large crowd of his disciples, including the 12 disciples. And that by itself is something that just stuck with me, because I know sometimes when you just see the word disciples, you're automatically thinking about the 12, right? So I thought that was pretty cool that it was saying that it's naming a body of people that are already considered to be, followers of Jesus. So they label it as disciples. All right, so we've got a multitude of people from Judea, Jerusalem, and coastal regions of Tyre and Sidon, right? They were primarily Canaanites and Gentiles. So in terms of who, like, kind of zeroing in on a micro level, who is in these geographic areas, or who would be considered identified persons in the geographical areas, these are people that were known as Canaanites and Gentiles. So Canaanites were a group of what was the term used was Semitic speaking people who lived in the eastern Mediterranean coast. So Semitic languages are Arabic, Hebrew, and Amharic. Semitic comes from the Bible name Shem, the son of Noah, thought to be the ancestor of the Jews and Arabs. So the term Semitic today is actually considered outdated, just so you know. All right, so now again, Gentiles were people from outside of Palestine who came to hear Jesus. And so you also had Jewish religious leaders that are present, right, in this crowd of people, or the multitude rather. So they were labeled as like the chief priests and the scribes who played a significant role in the overall region. So they are not, or I should say, they're not explicitly mentioned, but we can say that they would have been also present and represented the group of religious leaders that were present, watching Jesus closely, looking for reasons to accuse him or just to challenge his interpretations, which were labeled as radical, right, at the time of the law. All right. So now also we got to just put it in a context of who's in power, right? You've got an idea of who the people were, the players there, and then also let's look at the condition of the time in terms of the government rule, okay? So you had the region being under Roman rule. The Roman prefect was Pontius Pilate. He was in power. He was the local governor, and he ruled over these areas. So you've got Judea, Samaria, and Idumea. And this is also where Jesus is very active in his ministry, right? And so basically, you've got in this text, Jesus addressing a very diverse group of followers, whether they be chief priests or, like I said, the different types of people that were considered to be already disciples of Jesus, as well as the 12, and then those who may not have been. So it says here, I put followers as well as potential followers. Okay. All right. So now let's look at for me, what I pulled out of this as an overall theme, and I hope this will just overall guide us into the discussion piece, and how you may hold it, right? And so I looked at this as a social justice issue, right? It's addressing the condition of not only what would be considered like a material poverty, right? Like a literal state of being, in terms of the conditions of the people, but also a spiritual type of poverty, meaning just, when we look at it as far as who are the people, these are people, while they are literally physically marginalized, they are also people that are considered people who are oppressed but have strong belief, right? They are believers in the ancient texts, the scriptures that talked about the all being, right? The one Jehovah. Also, understanding that they are of a certain lineage, if you will, people from Israel. And so these are people who also have a condition within themselves where you may have heard the term poor in spirit. And that's where I'm talking from the lens of a spiritual poverty, where they are saying, yes, I have this physical state of, oppression, and also in this state of oppression in your energy and your spirituality, that also is affected. Yet I'm also in a mindset of, I believe that I'm going to find relief of it all. And that's going to be from the beliefs of the stories that the prophets have said, that there will be one who will come to save us, right? Who will relieve us, and all the things. So just kind of think on that from your own past studies or information that you may have learned in your faith. Okay. So this overall is meaning that it's very specific. Okay. So it's specific to, again, the conditions of the people, as well as the climate that I share with you as far as the time that they lived in. Now, Jesus is addressing concerns and issues of the community, right? So what's happening here is literally, again, there's people who have material wealth, this diverse crowd, the multitude. There are people who are labeled as the poor, legit. They are poor in the state of poverty as well. So you've got the poor, you've got people who are impoverished. But this is an overall theme that in this community, in this area, in terms of geography, like it's a common thing that people are questioning, the state of poverty, the state of wealth. Like these are debates that are common to be had amongst the community, right? So um, these concerns are identified not only in the overall gospel as far as a theme, but also here in this text that we're pulling out. And so you find that there is a gap of social boundaries. There's a gap between, like I said, the rich and the poor. Most people really in these areas were considered rural areas. So most of them lived in these rural areas. And these are considered poor agricultural peasants is how they were considered or looked upon. And so they were frequently in danger of, being a space of hunger or starvation, lack and, limitation, things like that. And not to mention, like I said, based off of the construct, right? You had the Roman rule, that also added an extra level of oppression, right? So the Roman rule marginalized these people, right? So they were forced to pay high taxes on what they earned, while in contrast, you had the wealthy. You even had the temple elites, right? These chief priests and people who hold their position of power, right? You had your urban landowners, while they were actually considered a small portion of this society, they were the ones who benefited the most off of the backs of these people in terms of the land, the rent, the cost for them to work the land, and how they had to, pay, like I said, the taxes. And there was different types, right? So you had a civil tax, you had religious tax, and just frame your mind around, as I'm painting the picture, who these people are and what they're dealing with. Okay. And so in addition to this material poverty and reference to the poor, this is where I was saying about the spiritual poverty. So you have the ones who remain faithful to God, right? In times of difficulty, just, wrap your brain around and see, just start it as I'm talking, you can start to think about, can I relate to this concept, right? Those who will remain faithful to God in times of difficulty. So they were the ones who were considered the humble, okay? And in Hebrew, this is a term called anawim, or the faithful remnant of Israel. Give me 1 second. I want to hide the. Okay, here we go. So you can see the screen. All right. And so the people of the time who were identified as, Jewish, were aware of the blessings that were found, like I said, in their text, their ancient scriptures, as far as who they were, being considered the faithful remnant. So just, I don't know, I felt that to be kind of powerful to have this duality of not only a real lived experience and a physical state of being, of lack, limitation, oppression, because economically they don't have the means, and not only that, the conditions of life itself based off of the construct, right, the systems of oppression that they're dealing with, and then they have that self in terms of how they are affected by the condition, but the self, the identity of the self, and that they are spiritually poor in a way, right? But they are the ones that Jesus is looking out for when it's talking about that they will be blessed, because they have this this identity to be faithful to the idea of the one, right? Their source, who is able to bless them and redeem them and things like that. So I just thought that was pretty powerful. So here's where we're gonna unpack this a little bit. And these are just frames that I want you to, go skim through these questions so we can have an open dialogue. But I want you to think about, what does this text overall tell us about what it was that Jesus desired, right? And if you need to go back, you probably let me know if you want me to go back to the slide so you can read it again, or you could just, pull it up where you are. But I want us to, discuss that, right? Look at that. Start to think about, what does this tell you about what Jesus' goal was? What was his desire? Um, who were the blessings for? Pretty much told you that. And the judgment, right? So remember in the text, it was saying, woe to the rich, right? So it was a lot of this, woe to you, woe to that. So you get to just name that. And then I wanted to, like I said, my goal was to put it in our laps, right? So what is this text saying to you? Okay. How can you engage with it today, in today's context, right? So start to think about how I was able to give you context and audience and things like that, where you can start to think about, well, who's in, you heard it earlier in our prayer request with Trustee Marlene, who's in power here, right? Who's the one that's now in today's time considered to be the marginalized, and who's affected by the system, if you will, right? And even just the conditions of our society in terms of the economics. All right, and so then what might we be asked to do, right, in relation to this text today? So Pastor shared earlier about how, and I also just framed it in terms of our theme being compassion, but what that requirement of the compassion is, that compassion is actually active. It's not a word that sounds good and looks good on paper or anything like that, whatever font text you're going to use, but it's really an embodiment, right, of this idea in terms of compassion. So when we want to talk about how might we be asked, right, to show up in compassion and in relation to this text today, think about that, right? So the example is how we were able to go to a laundromat in the local community and just really bless people by taking care of their laundry needs. So that meant giving them money, to pay for the laundry, giving them the resources in terms of the detergent that they need, the fabric softener that they need, everything, right? When you go do laundry, whether it's home or to the laundromat, everything that you needed, they had, right? So think about that. But that's how we showed up. So I'm just giving you the image there. And then we blessed them with, fresh, real water, right? It was a person who came in and we had like sweets and things like that because we were also celebrating and acknowledging the day had passed, which was Valentine's Day. So we were just showing up. Also, another example of love, in a literal sense and overall in a metaphorically type of speaking in terms of how compassion and showing love is an act, right? So just think about that too. And lastly, what information is important for you that you need to apply to your life to share with others, right? So I'm getting us to look at it about the text and, what was Jesus trying to achieve. You can talk about what the blessings were and identifying what you saw in the text, who was the blessed, right? Who was the woe, who was the judgment for, then start to look at it from, okay, what is this text saying to me? How can I look at it to engage in this text as far as today's context? And then what action, right? Compassion. It's a requirement that compassion is love in action. What might I be asked of myself to do today in relation to this text? And what information is important for me to be able to apply it and share it with others? So you guide me. If you need me to keep this slide up so you can talk to these points or even go back to the text and let me know. But this is the time that I wanted to have real just candid conversation, no right or wrong, but to share how you hold this. And yeah, floor is open. Just a couple seconds, couple comments, please. Thank you.
Mr. Cole, what this scripture reminds me of is the verse in the Bible where it says, "To everything there is a season." Where it talks about because I think this is the four woes. Woe to those that are rich, for a time will come when you won't get to enjoy those comforts. Woe to those that are happy, for eventually you'll mourn. And it just reminds me of the verse, "To everything there is a season," where no matter who you are, what you have in life, none of life's fragilities or excesses will escape any of us. We will all at some point in time, understand what it means to laugh, to cry, to mourn, to have wealth. And wealth isn't always, even though some people like, myself, I'll just say, associated sometimes with money. Wealth is also, when you're in good health, I can be wealthy because I have my health and I'm in my right frame of mind.
Right.
So this verse just speaks to me, for us to walk in wisdom at all times and recognize the days and the seasons that you are in, because another day and another season will show up. And can you still be as healthy? Can you still be as happy? Can you still be as faithful? Can you still be as compassionate? No matter what the season looks like, are you still able to walk around with that compassionate love in action spirit and say to yourself, I still have something that I can give to the world, instead of always feeling like, woe is me?
Yeah. Like a shift in perspective. I hear that
Yes.
as you were talking. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for sharing, Minister. All right. So thank you, Minister. Let's get some more voices in the room here.
Minister, what's the word? Never heard it before. For those of us who keep the faith.
They were it was a remnant.
That was a new one
remnant.
on me. I never saw that word.
So this Hebrew word, if you can, I don't know,
yeah.
highlight it, but
Oh, Anawim.
Anawim, yeah.
Anawim. That's a different name. Different name. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a new one.
Yep.
Anawim. Okay.
Yep. Did you have anything to kind of come up in reference to some of these ideas that you can see on the screen about.
Well, I guess I didn't realize there were so many different contexts. Those who were poor,
Mhm,
um, as I had read, those who were poor in terms of resources,
mhm,
and then those that were spiritually poor,
mhm.
and then you have the what is it? Anaswim? Anamim? I like that word. I want it.
Anawim. So the
Anawim.
Anawim is going to be in correlation to the spiritually poor.
They're
And so,
related to the spiritually poor because,
right.
well, but they're the ones that have the faith. Why are they spiritually poor?
So it's the gift and the curse, I guess the
Oh,
best way to put
okay.
it. Because you think about it, so
Mhm.
my thought around it is like for me, I can go through some trials and tribulations, and those trials and tribulations can be a direct correlation to the money that I make, the neighborhood that I live in.
Uh-huh.
You know what I'm saying? Some constructs that may feel bigger than me, that is just
Uh-huh.
based off of like my dynamic, right? Young black male, whatever. Okay.
Right.
And knowing that that is a lived reality, a lived experience, that can affect my thoughts, my thinking, my emotional state of being, to where I may not, like Minister Renee was saying, can I still show up in compassion? So compassion can be for myself, and also for others. But you know what I mean? Sometimes when you are just in a state of oppression, if you will, that, like I said, can feel bigger than yourself, outside of yourself, it can affect your mood. It can affect the way you think. It can affect your spirit, right?
Right. Right.
And so that being a real lived reality,
And
a lived experience, holding that, then what to me inspires me is that those same people who are experiencing that type of oppression on those, type of polar opposites, if you will, are also saying, I still hold faith that that the divine, the one who my ancestors spoke of, right? I mean, just think about it. Us being people of African American, descent
hmm
or experience, right? That's our spirit. That's our experience in this country, right?
yes.
While we were the ones who were lynched, murdered, raped, stolen, all the things, and were delivered the goods, the spoiled goods of the God from the oppressor, right?
hmm
We found the empowerment in that God, that same God, so to speak, in a different way, right? That was the God for us who liberated us, who told us to hold on, who told us, if not for me and this lived experience, for my children's children. You know what I'm saying? Uh,
hmm
and so we get to hold that as being a part of, like, these people saying, I'm part of that lineage, the children of Israel, right? Who had the lived experience of coming out of oppression, coming out of the wilderness, also experiencing abundance, manna from heaven, all the stuff. But they had this keen sense of knowing that it was their source to the divine that
hmm
allowed them to have this identity of, like I said, the faithful remnant, right? They were
Faithful
the
remnant.
humble, and knowing that they were part of the promise. That's the best way, I guess, could kind of
Gotcha.
put that.
Okay.
You know.
But remnant meaning a small portion.
Yeah, so right, so like the leftovers, if you will, right?
Yeah.
Somebody may
Yeah.
say the leftovers, the left out, the
Yeah.
forgotten, I've heard. But what's to me what stood out, which was keen about all the players that were present, they were the majority. You
Right.
know, so think about it, how even again in this, to me, in this country, this is my own, these Minister Cole's own 2 cents, that
Okay.
the powers that be want us to think that we are the minority based off of XYZ, but we
Right.
are the majority.
Majority.
You
Right.
understand? Uh,
Yeah.
so that gets to be, to me, kind of like the conversation of, when do we get to shift into the knowing of our true power and who we really are? Because, like I've heard, truth be told, that they are the ones that are in fear of the truth, which is we are the ones that are are actually not the minority, but the majority, right? So, you know, you had like the chief priests, okay?
Hmm.
Like I said, they were just a small sect of this society, but they also were the most considered to be the
Powerful.
oppressors, right, in power because they benefited off the backs of those who had to pay those taxes. And these weren't just regular old taxes. Like these people are getting, tapped civilly, religiously. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
All
I don't
kinds
know.
of.
That was kind of right, all kind of ways. That was kind of like my little 2 cents tangent, I guess. Because I was just thinking, I was like the nerve, right? They're not even like the majority,
Right. And they're paying
but
more than their share.
exactly, but they're the ones who hold the power to oppress.
Right.
And so to me, in that energy, that could be where perspective comes into play because the projection could be the narrative that we are the majority because we, as you can see, have the ability to oppress you. So we are the most powerful. Uh,
Hmm.
but they're not. But it's hard to hold that when you are here, right? You are feeling the effects of not having enough. Who's always, that the $5 is always, what's left over 75 cents because you live in this area that requires you to pay. If you want to live, you have to pay, right? And so,
Hmm.
remember the occupations are, number one, they're in rural areas and the occupation is agriculture, right? So they're the landskeepers. They're the ones who have to till the land to provide food for everyone, not just for themselves, but they are also the ones who are being taxed and, like I said, marginalized. So,
Hmm.
when
Hmm.
it's talking about the blessings and the judgment, right? So it's the blessings for that majority, because like I said too, this is a common construct. This is a common conversation between the haves and the have-nots, right? The wealthy and the poor.
Hmm.
This is on everybody's mind in the community, in the state of the country, so to speak, right? So we can kind of see it in today's context as well.
Absolutely.
And Jesus is saying, no, trust and believe that idea of God that you have, that's the one who's actually leaning into you even more so because of God is a God for the oppressed. You know what I mean? That's why I said this is a social justice text to me, because again, they will want you to believe that that God is not for you; it's for
Right.
them. But quite the contrary. So then Jesus is saying it's judgment for those who are satisfied and comfortable in being the oppressors.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. But I don't want to keep because I'm just having a conversation by myself. You listening, but I really like getting into this particular text to share with you, and that was all that was coming up for me while I was doing it. So, anybody else want to share what the text is saying to you, and just let's try to unpack, like Minister Renee had guided us, how we can look at how we could show up with it in um, you know,
Hmm.
today's day. I don't know how else to say it. I want to hear from my DCs.
Okay.
Yep, let's go.
Here comes one.
Just looking at the woes, it reminded me of the text in the Old Testament that was talking about the sins of your sister Sodom, where they were full of food and haughty, and they didn't care about those who had, the have-nots. And it's a warning to them, just like for Sodom. Uh, be careful how you are worshiping the things that you have instead of worshiping God. You're making this your idol and mistreating those who do not have as if they are less than when God sees them in an elevated state. Yeah, that's.
Hmm.
Yep.
Hmm.
And DC Sharon, you make a good point because like with all of these things that are happening now, like in this administration, right?
Mhm.
Yes, it's unnerving to everyone, right? Especially
Yes.
you know, the marginalized and the oppressed, because we see what the administration is trying to do. They're trying to strip away everything that the Obama administration did. But
Right.
like I said to Bishop the other day, like we had 8 years of plenty under Obama, right? Obama was in office and he did everything that he was supposed to do for all Americans, right? To
Right.
empower everyone, right? And so now here we have someone who is coming and saying, you know, we didn't prosper as much as we hoped to have prospered under all of those incentives and incentives. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to strip away all of the things that he thought made the playing field level, right?
Oh, that's good.
Right.
But what's happening is the people that have always been quote unquote poor, marginalized, oppressed, we have always learned how to live without and how to make do with what we have. But those who benefited the most from the DEI policies, those who got those jobs that paid those high salaries, who increased their corporate profits, those people are the one that now that he's starting to do all these cuts, they're the ones that are being shaken to their foundation and
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
because they don't know how to cope in a land where famine was or where you just had to make do.
Right.
Yeah. Woe to you who laugh now, for you shall mourn and weep.
Right. So we have coping skills because we
do have that.
we've always pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps, right?
We've
We've been living in the land of the privileged, but we've never been the privileged. So now that the privilege is being brought back down lowly, they don't like it. They don't like what they're seeing. They don't like how it feels. But
they don't know what's next.
They don't know what's next. But the one thing I do know is that those people who rely solely on God will get through this.
Yeah. It's the faithful.
It ain't gonna be my money. Cause I went to the market the other day. I got like 10 things. I think I spent like $200. I started to
Ain't that ridiculous? It is.
I started to put it
is.
all back.
It's really ridiculous.
I ain't lying. I started to put it all. Mr. Cole, I started to put it all back.
Yeah.
But we're going to see the next 4 years is going to be interesting. Yes, a lot of people are going to suffer, but we come from a race of people and a culture of people that we know how to make do with what we have because we've never allowed ourselves to get beyond what God has given us. And even when we had less, we still shared it amongst those that were less fortunate.
Yep.
Appreciate that.
Amen.
Thank you, DC. Thank you, Minister. I see DC Karen just came off of mute. If you wanted to jump in there, tag your it.
All right. Well, I think what stands out to me, and I appreciate what everybody has shared in agreement with most, this Jesus is really teaching us and healing us with these verses, these lines, and he's really introducing a new way of leadership for us, and not just we think of the poor, right? We've gone through some discussion about that, but the poor and or the rich, because as Minister Renee was saying, that it can flip. One day you may be poor, or the next day one day you may be eating well or happy, and the next day you may be sad. Just it may rain or shine, sun may shine one day and it may be raining the next. So life is that paradigm of what stays true is this new way of thinking Jesus, this new way that will always take you through all of the trials and tribulations, that will make you become the faithful remnant, because the faithful remnant are those that are able to withstand the persecutions and temptations of the world and still remain faithful. Whether you are hungry or your belly is full, you are still faithful.
Mhm.
As God is faithful to us. So,
Yeah, it's like
I
Job.
think that the blessings and the woes, as I said to someone just recently who was lamenting about Trump and the rich, and I said, it's funny, we think of the rich. Who is the rich? Because to one, a person below a certain income level may be poor. But what I've always realized, and it's the blessing of being able to travel throughout this country and in the Caribbean, is that I've always been fascinated from a young child that the poorest of places seem to, when they gather, have the most fun.
Mhm.
Even though with a little bit of food, everybody will bring that little morsel together so that
Mhm.
all can eat and then be festive. And so is that poor? Because it always felt quite rich and wealthy to me.
Yeah.
So we really have to realize that the blessing is for all of us, and as the new apostles that we are and disciples, that we're here to symbolize that new way of walking, and realizing that no matter what the job is, no matter what the bank account or no bank account may be, because many of those people in federal government that were six figures aren't
And
there
not
anymore.
six, not
Okay.
six anymore. Nope.
So life has drastically changed, and
No
it's
figures.
only been a few days. So God is doing a magnificent thing, and we are the ones to show folk how to get through it by working together and walking in that faith, for we are rich in it.
Yeah.
Amen.
I love
Amen.
that.
DC Karen. Amen.
Come through DCs. Well, family, I love you all so much. This is actually going to be the end of the discussion on tonight. I've just, really appreciated the rich discussion, the rich conversation, the candid opinions and ideas. And this was just if there were any final thoughts, just giving space for that to come into the room. But otherwise, I want to say to everyone who's watching us on tonight, we love you. We appreciate you. Just know this is how we do it, right? We take this text, we unpack that thing, and we just get real and honest. We sit it in our laps. We look at it from the perspective of the time and context and, culture, all of that good stuff. And really, the goal for me, at least, and I'm pretty sure my family here in the Zoom room shares it, is that, how can we be, as I heard, the living epistle? How can we take this word, break it down, dissect it, but then digest it, right? Ingest it, digest it, so that it's not just to be understood on an intellectual plane, but really to have it be embodied and a part of our being. And we can go, I say go out, but it's not like you got to go in a corner somewhere. We could just be and be willing to share it, right? And that's something that I, again, want to just recognize. We did that on this past Sunday. So if you ever want to just, pull up and hop out, connect with us, we would love for you to, not just on this virtual space, but overall, just reach out to us, find us on Sundays, like I mentioned earlier, in person. We do have a physical worships environment. It's safe for you, it's comfortable, it's welcoming and inviting. But this is our Tuesday night Bible study, and we also call it spiritual development because just like personal development, we need to feed our spiritual man, right? On a regular basis. So again, thank you for joining us. If you would like to donate, we are always welcoming donations, and we just want to say a blessing to you as freely and abundantly that you're able to give, freely and abundantly you shall receive. So we thank you, everyone, for joining us on tonight. We want to say God bless you. We love you. And we want to close out. Thank you for sharing.